Ron Rooney. I'm a lecturer at the School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago. The subject of this videotape is return from foster through use of the task-centered casework method. You will see selections from the 16th and 17th sessions with Mrs. Eudora Carter. That is not her real name. A variety of practice skills defined in the profile of practice skills of task-centered casework, with special emphasis on techniques used in the middle phase, will be employed in these tapes. Mrs. Carter, the primary client in this case, is a client of the public child welfare system. 9 of her 10 children have been placed in foster care under court order in October of 1976. Foster care is substitute care out of the home, usually carried out by paid foster parents. The causes of foster care in general and the definitions of reasons for removal are vague, and criteria for return of children to their homes are seldom specified. Poor minority families headed by women form the largest sector of the public child welfare clientele. According to David Fanchel, the average length of stay in foster care is 5 years, and that normally includes several changes in foster placement. The foster care system as a whole has grown as more children tend to be brought into the system than are released back to their homes. Mrs. Carter, the primary client in this case, is 40, black, a widow, recipient of public aid for more than 15 years, and the head of a very large family of 10 children. Her husband, Mr. Carter, was a heavy drinker and died about 2 years ago. So you can see she fits the profile of the largest sector of the public child welfare clientele. Over a year ago, a counselor from a private agency recommended to Mrs. Carter that she temporarily place her children in foster care while she had an operation which she had been meaning to have. Mrs. Carter briefly agreed to that plan, later changed her mind about the placement and about the hospitalization. However, that counselor and public child welfare agency went to court and were able to obtain temporary custody of the 9 children aged 2 to 15 that were at that time living with Mrs. Carter. She didn't know of the placement, as I understand it, until police cars arrived at her home to remove the children. The child welfare staff and outside counselors gave as reasons for the removal that the attendance of the children in school was quite poor, their hygiene was poor, Mrs. Carter was known to have drinking problems, and there was some question about her ability to supervise her children. Her oldest daughter, Willona, only stayed in foster care one night and ran back to her home. She was unofficially in her home for several months and then officially returned home by the judge. The second daughter, Arlene, was returned in March of this year. No other children have been returned since that time. Mrs. Carter has repeatedly sought visits with the children she has in foster care. She has seen the youngest 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, only once since last May. Other children she has seen some more than once. Mrs. Carter moved suddenly out of public housing in May of this year when her second oldest daughter, Willona, was raped. She found housing on her own and has had many problems with that housing that will be discussed in this tape. She and her family were referred to me as a counselor for a private family counseling agency by a worker from the state child welfare agency. The goal of that referral was to help Mrs. Carter in any way towards the possible return of her children. On my first visit to her home, Mrs. Carter clearly wasn't expecting anyone. She doesn't have a telephone. She was obviously inebriated at that time, was generally incoherent, but very clear about one thing. She did want return of her children. The home smelled very heavily of urine. There were piles of clothing, a broken door, in general, a very depressing scene. She was asked by me as a beginning task for the next session to attempt to be sober for that session, and that she might begin to clean her home, since we knew that that was one of the obstacles seen by the court. I wrote down clearly for her the day and time that I would be returning. When I did return a week later, Mrs. Carter was quite sober, clean, and the house was remarkably cleaner. Since that time, Mrs. Carter and I have met for 16 sessions. Over 80 tasks have been developed between us. 47 of them have been carried out by Mrs. Carter and 28 by myself. That's about 60% were client tasks. An oversimplified view of the task-centered model would be to see the main activities as the identification of target problems, followed by the examination of obstacles and formation of tasks, which in some way then result in problem reduction. In this case in particular, and in child welfare cases in general, I think that the model, this conceptual view of the model tends to be, it needs to be expanded to a greater concentration on work with collaterals. In these two sessions, you'll hear reference to a multitude of collaterals. And in these two sessions, these are not the only collaterals considered or worked with over the course of the case. In addition to Mrs. Carter and myself, I believe at least 7 of the 9 children are referred to individually. Mrs. Carter's deceased husband, not 1 but 3 separate public aid officials, each of which plays a vital role. 2 separate child welfare workers, one whose primary job is working with Mrs. Carter and another who works with several of her children. Mrs. Carter's landlord, various persons connected with Alcoholics Anonymous, different foster parents working with their children, the juvenile court judge and various court officials, school officials, and officials from Public Housing Authority. So a little more complicated view of the work in this case and in other child welfare cases would be that the first step remains the identification of target problems between the client and practitioner, with a heavy emphasis in this case on the identification of those conditions that are important to key collaterals. It's obvious in a case such as this that when the problem that the client sees and the goal that she wants to reach is controlled by someone else, in this case a judge, then the criteria that would influence the judge have to be identified and considered in the formation of target problems. Once this the criteria of the important collaterals are identified, then a variety of client and practitioner tasks are developed that might be expected to influence these target problems. Our experience with these cases has been that many contacts are made with a variety of other professionals, child welfare workers, court officials, public aid officials, probation officers, school officials, persons who are invited in some ways to collaborate in the work towards reduction of target problems, and in some cases are just asked to be neutral, and the objective is to avoid their becoming an obstacle to our work together. The target problems identified by Mrs. Carter as I mentioned before, there was one extremely clear target problem. Mrs. Carter has 7 children placed in foster care and wanted to have them returned to her. Several conditions that would be expected to influence the judge's decision were identified, and work towards reducing those conditions has begun. First, clearly Mrs. Carter's current housing was inadequate. She had no stove, no refrigerator, no hot water, and until about a month ago had a broken window. Second, Mrs. Carter had a drinking problem which she acknowledged interfered with her child care. Third, she acknowledged that the attendance of her children in school was erratic. And finally, her house was unclean and basically not with good hygiene. Over the past 16 sessions, as I mentioned, over 80 tasks have been formulated and carried out. At this time, the window is repaired. Mrs. Carter decides in the current session that there is no longer any hope that the landlord will repair her apartment or help her get a stove or refrigerator, so she makes plans to move to other housing. Her drinking has been greatly reduced. It is discussed in the second session and appears not to be a major obstacle at this time, though there's continued attention to it. The 2 children who've been returned to her since March are now enrolled in school and are doing fairly well. Her house has been of certainly adequate standards for the last several months, and that was aided by the placement of a homemaker by public aid. I will use as a structural method in this case task sheets. You'll see that the task sheet reads what family members and the social worker agreed to do between counseling sessions to work on agreed upon problems. The name of the client is written at the top, the name of the social worker. In the first session, often the social worker's phone number is listed there. The date of the session in which the tasks were set up, and also, very importantly, the date of the next session and the time where the client and social worker will meet, since many of these families, as I said before, do not have a telephone. Next is listed the session number and the number of sessions left. This gives an opportunity in each session to review where the client and social worker are on their contract. Below then is written specifically what the tasks are to be completed by the next session. The task carried out by whom, by what date are written, and then in the following session in the right column is written what was done, what progress was made on those tasks, and what obstacles there might have been. The use of these task sheets seems to act to formalize the session. That's particularly useful when the sessions are carried out in the family home. The tasks are specified quite clearly. This helps also the worker in reviewing problems and reviewing tasks, helps in summarizing at the end of the session. The writing down of the task progress makes both that progress and the obstacles more tangible for both the practitioner and the client. Meeting time can be very clearly specified. And finally, the memory of persons who are to carry out tasks can be refreshed by reviewing their task sheets. Use of the task sheets has, in this case, has allowed us to develop an average of 3 to 4 client and practitioner tasks each session, which are typically carried out. A note of caution would be that the task sheets are only sheets of paper. They are only as good as the tasks that are developed on them, and unless good work developing tasks is done, it isn't a useful exercise to carry them out. The sessions that you will see cuts from 2 sessions. The audio quality on the first 4 cuts is not good and is included only because of the important content. The audio quality of the second session is much better, and hope you'll bear with us until that section begins. A public aid service worker had visited this home a few weeks after Mrs. Carter moved here and said that public aid would not help her rehabilitate this home since it was not adequate. In the 3 months since, we have worked with the landlord and attempted to have hot water put in and a stove and get the window fixed. As you can see, only the window has been fixed. One of the complaints had been that Mrs. Carter's home was unclean. Mrs. Carter only has 2 items of furniture, and when a homemaker was placed by public aid, there was really very little for her to do.
Our 16th meeting today. Means we got 8 left. 8 more minutes and over. Oh man, we ain't got nothing to do with that. Well, we got 8 left on this agreement. If we get in a spot and we can't get enough done, we may be able to extend again. I don't know. I'm probably okay with this, but it's just a matter of my agency's got a contract only work so long with people. We have to have special permission. So.
In the segment you've just seen, the child on Miss Carter's lap is her grandson, the son of her second daughter, Willona. We discuss the length of the contract. This is the 16th session and the 4th session of a second 12-session contract. Though normally we work for 12 sessions, in the child welfare cases, many of the cases have recontracted because target problems were not reduced in that time due to essentially the slow speed at which public aid worked. There's the possibility that we will recontact for a 3rd session after this.
Anything else?
You said, but you said I could have found a place if you got the case, I could go ahead and see one.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. That's exactly right. So if you find a place that before you put your money down, I would call Key Street and tell him the address and find the time you can go and soon before you have to. That sounds like a good idea. You know, it's the same number that you called last year. We just asked for Key Street.
Okay.
You're going to ask Mr. Lake tomorrow if you see her, right? Mm-hmm. The case is coming through. Because if it does, then she's the one who will go with you.
Mrs. Carter suggests the amendment of a task here to take care of an obstacle that had blocked her successful move into this house. We also summarize the tasks on the task sheet. Mrs. Carter keeps a copy of the task sheet to review in the following week. We discuss keeping the children in school, since this is something the judge will consider in the next court hearing.
So let's go over things that we're going to do by next week. You're going to call to visit, and now you say you're going to check about being in school. And you're going to go right ahead as soon as you get your check and look for a place, but you're not going to agree, you're not going to put your money down until you get Key Street or look at it. The CHA housing application comes and you can fill it out on your own, go ahead. If you need some help with it, I'll help you with it.
Okay.
We'll go to court Monday. Sit 2 or 3 hours until it falls in.
You ain't kidding about that.
See whatever you can do to keep those two going to school.
Okay.
Because really, I do believe that the next step, and when we go back to court next time, we get the house fixed up. The first question they're going to have is, the kids that are there now, are they going to school? And you can say, and I can say, go ahead and after checking the school and say, yes, they are. They return some kids. If you can't, then you won't. How's the police have been sitting around here? That's good.
Between sessions, Mrs. Carter and I appeared in juvenile court. Representative of Public Aid opposed our plan to work toward return from foster care, cited Mrs. Carter as being unresponsive and unreliable with their agency. This was apparently based on one visit to the Carter home in the past 6 months. In the next section, a potential obstacle to the task of securing better housing through public housing authorities explored. The problems of the client's own efforts of advocacy in her own behalf were also seen. Transitions between problem, task review, obstacle, and task formulation are seen to be rather loose and fluid. Okay, tell me what you were just now saying about what do you think is going to happen when you make that application to CHA?
I don't think they're going to accept us, because when I moved out of there, I owed them $260 because they didn't kick out of the apartment I was in. Because my daughter got raped in that apartment, so I moved out, but they also taken me to court too.
They were?
They had.
Since you moved out?
Before I moved out.
What for?
For not paying their rent. See, my sink was all tore up, and I didn't have no stove that I could cook on. It was a stove there, all I could use was the eyes, but the other one never come on. I didn't have no refrigerator where I could put no store, no food, so I kept telling them to give me one. They didn't give me there. So I decided I'll hold the rent and see what they give me one. So then when they sent me to court, and the judge asked me how come I hadn't paid the rent, I told him. Then he had them to go and investigate and see why they hadn't given me a stove and refrigerator. And they found the judge got behind me and gave me a whole piece of stove and refrigerator.
But they still wanted you to pay your rent then?
Yeah, but they would never fix the sink. And they would come and cut the water off. I mean, I could never get them to do nothing in my apartment with me and my children when I asked them. When I asked them to paint the place, I had to always wind up painting myself.
So when you left, did they try to get the money from you?
Went down there and talked to my counsel, Mr. Crow, and I asked him could I pay him so much of the money, and catch up, and he said no, I had to pay all the money at one time, so I didn't pay it, because it didn't matter. No.
They haven't got in touch with you again, it seems.
About the money? No. Not since I counseled my niece.
Well, it sounds like you're right. That's going to make it tough. I wrote a letter. We talked to that man, Mr. Hill, and he told me to, once he calmed down about talking about how uncooperative you had been, then he started cooperating. And he said to write a letter that might help you, and I brought you a copy. A client once said to me she wondered what social workers write in their little books. Probably bad things about us, the clients, she said. I make a policy of giving a copy of all reports and letters I write on the behalf of clients to them to keep in their task folders.
Be back in the high riding, but in nowhere, because I had a lot of trouble when I was living in those buildings. My daughter first, my older daughter got shot in there. Second, my daughter got raped in there. I just don't want to be in there no more. Plus, I had a gun put to my head in there.
You talking about any high-rise?
Well, I think all of them about the same.
One of the causes for removal of Mrs. Carter's children had been the inadequacy of their housing. It's clear here that Mrs. Carter's alternatives for better housing are very limited.
That's true. If I could get back into the projects, I would like to have one with a walk-up in it.
You mean one of those low-rises?
Yeah, my kids could be going outside. Because when I lived in the projects, I didn't let my kids outside. I lived on the 7th floor, and they had to go all the way down to the 1st floor. So my little kids all ever got outside.
But you just caught in a circle because,
If you don't go to public housing, how are you going to find a place that's large enough on the money that you have to support not just 3 kids here, but say the next 2 or more?
Well, only way I can do that is like he said, once I get if I get a place they approve of, then I would write a letter from them to care to the public aid and they put them back on there.
We're in the process of formulating tasks mindful of the obstacles just anticipated. Next, the practitioner will report on a task he took on to contact a public aid worker.
You have it straight from the horse's mouth. I talked to him yesterday, and he said the case is no longer here. I moved it September 27th, and so he said that it'll take a few days to get it processed in, but that we should start contacting what is it, the West Area office?
14, wait a minute. Let's see now. 3910 West Albany.
3910. That isn't too far from here, is it?
They said about 9 to 10 blocks.
Well, so you think...
I said I would give it a try, but I would ask them, could I stop paying if they say I have to pay, because I know I'm going to have to pay to get back in there. Or could I pay so much of it each month? Like if they charge like $80 or $90 a month, then I pay $100 and something so much, $130 a month till I get it out of over a period of time. If they'll do it like that. I did it like that for some people, and I don't know why they do it like that for me. I'm not.
Now you said that you've been talking to Honeyman about taking you around.
And after I came from Coke Monday, I haven't talked to him about taking me around. I was waiting to see what you decide, because I know I wasn't earning this money, so I had to be honest.
Yeah.
But also, I want to know, I'm not supposed to pay Mr. Robin no money this month, right?
Well, we didn't talk about it.
Much of the work in this case is seen to be predicting the actions of key collaterals and planning alternative courses that Mrs. Carter might undertake. A 3-fold contingency plan is in process of development here. Ms. Carter will look for private housing on her own while also making a public housing application, while also planning to hold off the current landlord. In addition, the practitioner is seen offering to carry out a practitioner task, in this case getting a receipt book. Mediating and explaining the actions of collaterals and planning how to best use their services to help the client is seen to be a major activity of the practitioner.
You know, somebody gave me an idea the other day about that. Is that what some people do is we could get you a receipt book of your own, and you could fill it out and just have him sign it. And that gives him no excuse about his nephew didn't come or whatever. But the question is whether you should pay the rent. Sounds to me like you better. I don't know. But you know, you get caught in between.
But Mr. Rooney, I don't think I should pay no rent here. I think I should go. If we do put in for this housing project, how long do you think it would take to get it?
Well, if you hadn't told me what you just told me, it wouldn't take very long. But you know for sure that it would. You know what the record is. The first thing they're probably gonna think is this the same reason here before that was hassling us? And they'll say, yes, it is. And they'll say, well, it looks like this social worker is trying to run a game on us of some kind. So they definitely want to meet with me and you and before they take you.
Well, see, they also know my kids have been taken too.
Yeah. So we have to convince them.
But see, I was paying rent for, even so, I don't say I didn't make me up to no $260 in the first place, because they're taking my kids last year in November, and I paid that job till almost, I stopped paying in January. January 1.
Well, what I think we got to do is go ahead and send this through, but not stop there. You keep on looking for another place, and if you find a place that looks good, we'll contact this Miss Chalet way, and we'll take it and we'll tell them forget about this application.
But you might not find that kind of place, and so rather than wait until November when it's going to be awful cold here.
It's already awful cold here at night.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get people to pay his gas bill. Well, I'm not.
Yeah. And the other side of that is about the landlord here. We just don't know how long you'll be here. It could be that you'd move in a week, but that would be the best, right? Likely you'll be here another 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't know how long he's going to let you stay without you paying the rent.
That's what I'm doing. I just ain't going to pay it. I'll stay with somebody till I get out. I'm just not going to pay him no rent. Because he ain't said pay no rent. He said send $130 to the gas company. And see, then that way I'll be messing myself up. Why should I be paying gas bills when I ain't got no gas at all?
It sounds like he wants you to pay the gas bill on this building.
He wants he said he told everybody, instead of paying him their money for rent this month, go to the credit exchange and have it made out to people like the gas company. Bring the money order to him and he's going to sign it on the back. And then mail it in. But see, I ain't got no proof I paid him nothing for rent.
That's true.
All I got to prove is I paid the gas company some money. Which everybody knew I ain't got no gas, so why should I be paying gas?
He didn't explain to you why he wants people to do this?
No, that's all. He didn't. He just told me that.
Mm-hmm.
He told me that Tuesday morning. So I ain't paid him nothing. And I don't think I'm going to pay him nothing.
The only way that you might do that would be, you got to explain to you how that would give you any kind of record that you'd paid your rent. And why he can't do it himself. Why can't you just give him the money and he take everybody else's money and go over there and pay them?
Well, that's what I want to know, but he didn't say it like he said, just nailed it in.
And
I'm thinking like Mr. Haskell said, I'm thinking his man is trying to stall this bill for something until you get tired of it and you're going to turn it loose, and I just don't think I could give him my money like that.
yeah. It's hard to figure what he's trying to do.
He's up to something that ain't no good.
Well, sounds like a good reason for stalling him, at least. I mean, if this was just a regular month and he came to ask for your money, there isn't much you could say, but you could stall him for a week. But I would probably keep the money ready in case you do have to pay it. And let me see if I can get a hold of a receipt book for you, because that would be, if it turns out that for some reason you really do have to do this thing for him, go to the gas company. If he fills out the receipt that you paid your rent, then it doesn't make any difference who you made that check out to. You have your receipt.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. But what's good is my $130 going to do it? Ain't nobody else going to do it.
Do you think nobody else is going to do it?
Ain't nobody said they were going to do it.
Well, that's a good... And that helps. If other people aren't going to do it, then he isn't going to hassle you right away. You'll have to deal with everybody.
I don't know.
Child Welfare Agency had placed a homemaker who stayed for 3 months with Miss Carter, though there was little homemaking and such for her to do. Miss Carter had agreed to her coming as we considered that it might aid her in court. The homemaker was in fact quite helpful and had participated in our sessions. When her 3 months were up, however, Public Aid opted to send another homemaker rather than extend her term. Mrs. Carter had had 4 earlier homemakers over the course of the last several years and had asked all of them to leave. Helper turnover is a major problem with these clients.
And what about the housekeeping? Nobody ever done that for me?
That's really my fault. I forgot to call until too late, and then this morning I couldn't find her phone number. But I'll get on that before next week.
It really don't mean there ain't nothing more to do.
That's unfortunately the truth, but if we had somebody like Mrs. Banks, it was all right having her even if there wasn't a lot to do, it seemed to me.
No. But I wish you would like to really, I wish you would
You want
really
me to check that?
get into Miss and ask her why is it so hard for me to see my daughter and son, baby son and my little baby daughter.
Yeah. I don't know what to do about that, because the first thing she's going to bring up now is that it's getting cold.
I know that.
And are they going to be safe here? And she's probably going to be more willing for them to come back to the Michigan office and come here.
That'll be all right, as long as I can see them.
Well, we can get her to do that, I think.
Well, we should ask her.
Well, I would suggest this time, have you ever talked to her on the phone yet?
Nope. I didn't ever talk to nobody on the phone with Mr. Blazer. I never talked to them.
Well, sooner or later, you're going to have to start dealing with her more often. I think it ought to, because, she's the one that, she's got to get to know you better. Right now, she doesn't know much about you, and she doesn't trust you very much, and you don't trust her. What I would suggest is that...
Well, now I don't get involved, period. I don't like her.
She doesn't like you either.
Well, she's going to do like kids. She's supposed to bring me in.
That's right. That's right. You have that right. So I would suggest that I can give you her number. You call her. Ask her when it could be done, and I'll call her later.
Okay.
To follow it up. But she needs to hear from you first, I think.
Well, she know I don't like her.
Yeah. She does know that. Okay, let's go over these things we were going to do for this time. You were going to call Mr. last Friday. Did you talk to him?
No, I didn't get him last Thursday. I called him last Friday morning, and they said he was out in the field. He wouldn't be in until 11 o'clock. And then I asked the lady who answered the phone, was my kids coming into the office? And she said, yeah, they all supposed to be there at 10:30.
And so you left them?
Yeah, I left and went down there. I had Honey me down there. And when we got out there, we didn't see nobody but Robert Lee and Evelina. Then I saw Mr. Plitt on the hallway, and I asked him about the restaurant. He says he was in an emergency meeting, and Miss emergency meeting had an emergency case.
And so they could only bring those two?
That's something I can't understand, because he told me Junior and Robert Lee and them go to the same school.
Yeah.
And he said they stay on Robert Lee and them stay on the same street from him.
Same street?
And Junior on to stay 4 blocks from them, so how come he couldn't pick up Junior?
It may be that he just didn't... He doesn't always tell you exactly what he's thinking. I don't know what he was thinking, but maybe he didn't want you to have 3 kids over the weekend, but he thought that was too many.
Well, he should have told me on the phone that I was going to bring him home.
Oh, I get it.
I didn't know nothing about I was going to bring him home until I got there.
Well, you remember, it's all mixed up. Remember, I was the one that asked him, and earlier I said she wants to see Robert Lee and Evelina. She wants them to come here. And he said, okay, no problem. We'll do it. And then when I talked to you last Thursday, you told me, he said, come up to the office. And so what he did, he just mixed the two. He changed his mind, and he agreed to have him come out here. So it worked out, at least. You did get him. The balance between practitioner tasks and client tasks is important in these cases. Since Mrs. Carter has no phone, little money, and usually has to care for a grandchild, her ability to carry out many tasks is limited. The client must, however, be helped to carry out as many tasks as they're able to. The practitioner does what the client cannot do or would carry out with such difficulty that the time loss involved would threaten target problem reduction. Where possible, the practitioner shares that task with the client, carrying it out together or in stages. If the practitioner carries out the task alone, then those steps involved are identified with the client and walked through so that performance of the task can be modeled for the client to try in the future. Also, encouraging the client for efforts, especially those which are not intrinsically rewarding, is an important activity. I counted up how many of these tasks we've set up. How many do you suppose we've set up over the last 4 months?
Telling you? About 20?
More. You have taken on 55, and and I've done about 35, 80 between us, things that we've done, and then that's why I was getting so mad at that guy in court. He was saying that, you know, that you had not been cooperative. Well, we've done 80 tasks between us over the last 4 months. I don't know what much more we can do.
Well, I got to do the last and let's try to find me a place.
That's a big one.
Big as enough for the judge to approve of.
In the past section, the practitioner praises the client for efforts as she shows awareness of the steps ahead and the need to consider the important collateral to judge. In the next section, Mrs. Carter reflects thoughtfully and movingly about her experience with alcohol. The practitioner listens alertly for current conditions of the problem, possible future problems. He praises her for current efforts rather than lead her into an in-depth discussion of the past. Asserting herself with the children is identified as a possible future problem.
I went to the doctor after I left you Monday.
You did? I didn't know you were sick.
And I didn't know I was dyslexic either. I got high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they give you anything for it? What were you feeling like that caused you to go?
Well, I went from my side. So I've been having trouble with my left side for a long time, so I've been doctor see what did he tell me about it. Instead of him telling me about my side, he told me about my blood pressure.
Is he gonna tell you what to eat now?
Well, I gotta go back to him in 2 weeks. That'll be on the 17th.
Well, you definitely got to watch your health. You've been trying to do so much, but you can't do it without your health.
Oh, no. No, I ain't all like that, Mr. Rooney. The doctor told me last year I had to stop drinking. And I never did take it in no man, you know.
That contributes to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. All that whiskey, wine and stuff. That runs your blood pressure up. So I always did have trouble with my blood pressure, even though I started having kids. And still when I started getting drunk, falling out and, you know, on the streets and things, winding up in the hospitals. Yeah, none of that did shit. Yeah, I did that a couple of times last year. Got drunk and fell out on the sidewalk and wound up in the hospital.
All I remember is the first time I met you, you were in pretty bad shape.
He happened to then, he told me then if I didn't stop, I would wind up with cirrhosis at the liver.
Right.
But the only reason it might affect me so bad when I started, I stopped eating. I don't have no appetite to eat, I just have an appetite to stay drunk.
What about now?
I don't want to get drunk because I might not can survive the next time I fall out. And I want to get my kids back, so I put myself to a test. I know it's always going to be easy, but some friends and like those two just left out of him, they stone alcoholics, but they just don't know it. Some friends of mine was drinking, well, they've been drinking all this week. I haven't taken any of them because I don't drink and take medicine. That's one thing I don't do.
How can you see them, stay with them, and keep them drinking?
Yeah, Mr. Rooney, the guy got a Christian on, he drinks too. But it don't bother me, you know, that's the same thing. It don't bother me. It used to make me want some. But now it just don't, I don't feel how I'm interested in it. I tell people I'm going through another phase.
Good phase.
Yeah, I don't want to know. Because we even told me after these, so you can drink some, but just when it's stuff, I said, I don't want to drink no more, period. Alcohol has caused me everything that happened to me in my life. Caused me to be drunk, get my TV stole out of here, my radio. Caused me to
People
lose
take advantage of you?
Of course.
You see, that's the thing I think the public aid doesn't know about you, is that they haven't been here but once in 5 months, and they don't know that you haven't been acting like the person that they knew before.
I know, yeah.
And so what they've been trying to say to me and you is why should we make any special efforts for somebody who's going to, not be able to hold up?
Once you do something, I always have to do it, but that's wrong. A person can change if they really wanted to.
You didn't like going to those meetings, though, huh?
Well, I said I was going back this Saturday for sure, because when I went there, Mr. Rooney, I'll be honest with you, I always like to tell you the truth.
I know you do.
When I went there, I was so drunk, and I didn't know what I was saying. So I'm going back this time. So, but maybe I can understand what they're talking about,
Well, it sure helps if you're sober when you go.
Yeah, well, see, I was so drunk, so me and the man almost got in an argument.
And then you were asking why they serve coffee.
Yeah, you served a lot of coffee there.
And that's just because they have people like you coming in there.
I know one thing, there's a lot of people going there, so it must be something to it. Because I know the doctor told me don't fool myself over there on Mercy Hospital. He said once you're alcoholic, you're always alcoholic. But alcoholism is a sickness just like everything else. And that's the problem. See, I've been so weak all my life, I just can't stand hurting nobody. Before I say something that hurts somebody, I would let them hurt me, then I'd go get drunk. So forget about it. But you don't forget about it. You forget about it while you're drunk because you don't know nothing else. And you're real drunk because you're out.
And then,
when you get sober, it's the same thing.
Same situations right there.
Right. That's that. So it don't make no sense to get drunk. Just stand up and speak up for your rights, all I say. But so I ain't never did that, because if I had I left my husband 20 years ago. I mean, before he died, I would have long left it.
If you stood up for yourself?
Yeah. Maybe my kid's life would have been different. And maybe my life would have been different.
That's a hard decision to make, though. To leave like that, I don't think you can fault yourself too much for it, because you knew that if you did that, you were going to have to find some way of living for you and kids.
We was on ADC then. It wouldn't have been much different.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been no different, really. Mostly he was on us. We wasn't on him. What are you talking about?
So he...
When I went about to work, it was me.
Well, the fact is that now, that may have been true about you, and it may still be true about you sometimes that you don't stand up for yourself, but I haven't seen it for some time. When you needed to stand up for yourself in the last several months, you have done it.
Well, I'm trying to gain, I'm trying to gain courage so I can stand up for myself and stand up for my kids and stand up to my kids when I know they're wrong.
Well, that's
another
problem.
Yeah, I know it.
That's something we're going to have to deal with now, and we're going to have to deal with as soon as any of the kids come back. Mrs. Carter refers again in the following section to the many difficulties involved in arranging visits with her children. 2 child welfare workers devote an entire day to the retrieval of the 7 children from foster homes around the city, transporting them to an agency office and returning them. With their large caseloads, it's not difficult to see why weekly visits, as recommended by the court, have not been carried out. The child welfare worker assigned to Mrs. Carter's children has hesitated to arrange visits for her with her 5-year-old son because he has spoken frequently and fearfully of the police when his mother's name is mentioned. It was the worker's opinion that the child has a traumatic memory associated with the removal from the home. Mrs. Carter gives the opinion here, which I share, that he might continue to have those fears if he isn't allowed to see her more often. There's a catch-22 here. There may be a fearful memory caused by the forceful removal of the children by the agency. However, preventing her from seeing them may prolong that memory. Now, you're going to agree to call Miss...
Yeah, I'll call her tomorrow.
Okay. And I won't call her tomorrow, but I'll call her early next week.
Okay.
And I'll just play kind of dumb and say, did Miss tell you I know she wanted to see the little children? And I'll kind of feel it out. Okay.
Before that, that business without name, keep talking about the police, he gonna talk about that till they get back home.
About what?
About when they came and taken him away from me, he gonna talk about that until he get back home where I am.
That's right. Every time he sees you, or even thinks about you.
Yeah. I done saw him all now, but him and Christine. I ain't saw them since June.
That's right. I was there with you that time.
Yeah.
In the next section, the juvenile court experience is discussed. The roles, personalities, and foibles of the state's attorney, public defender, and judge are considered here. You know, in court, I was just thinking about that the other day. You remember when we got into court that the state's attorney did not ask Mr. anything.
He tried, when the judge asked him, he tried to say something, the state's attorney couldn't crawl.
He sure did. Now, that may have been an accident, but I don't think it was. I think the state's attorney has heard what's going on. He's had these reports. He met with you before. And he doesn't want to slow things up.
Oh, no.
So as far as Judge Hamilton thinks and knows right now, you're doing fine.
Yeah. But that man stands beside me. What is he up there for?
The public aid man?
The one who was standing beside me with all that hair on his face.
He was your public defender.
He will never say nothing, so they can leave him down.
Usually they at least will see you 5 minutes before you go in court. I don't know what happened this time. He didn't know what we were there for, I don't think.
I don't think it is either. But why come they don't never give you the same one back anyway?
I don't really know how they do it. I think they, whoever's assigned that day takes everybody who's in court, or most people. We're lucky that for whatever reasons we had the same state's attorney.
Well, I've been had him nobody since I've been going there.
Well, see, he knows what's going on, and he's not trying to block things. And you saw Mr. President stuck up for you again.
Yeah.
When it counts, he's been doing it. The client and practitioner here carry out the task of filling out the housing application together. This is an example of guided practice. They're interested in.
Where's the new phone there?
They don't want to tell you that. All they say is the difference is high-rises and row houses. They don't tell you what's new.
That's a new phone.
Loop.
Mm-hmm. Now this is on Taylor Racine. I was not being up there. Walk up, see.
Over the course of the 2 sessions here, 11 tasks were established and reviewed. Mrs. Carter will return to court in December. If she has heated housing with stove and refrigerator, she has a reasonable chance of regaining custody of at least 2 of her children. The process of working to return children is seen as long, difficult, and expensive in terms of agency time, even when the major personal causes of placement have been reduced. The longer children remain in care, the less likely they are to return home, and more likely they are to reach maturity in a succession of foster homes. I must emphasize here that the practice seen in this tape is part of an emerging adaptation of the task-centered model. It's neither fully formed nor has it been empirically tested. However, all activities of the middle phase of the task-centered model as currently depicted were employed in this videotape. Concentration on target problems as seen by the client can be seen as contributing to high levels of cooperation with persons often seen as intransigent by public agencies. In addition, the practitioner becomes sensitive to obstacles facing such clients, particularly through meeting in the client's home. 2 problems are recurring in these cases. 1, other agencies act as if they have a lifetime contract with the client. It's very difficult to get them to change or speed up procedures to help in a time-limited plan, though such a plan using court dates is eminently sensible to clients, the child welfare agency, and the court. 2nd, advocacy activities have to be planned very carefully. The gains likely from such an activity have to be matched with costs to the client of alienating those people on whom they have to depend.